Chapter 94, When Everything Falls into Place, 7. Knock. 30 minutes after Victor left, Patrick heard someone knocking on his door. Come in. Entering the room, Victor bowed slightly and said, Guild Master, as per your orders, we've looked through all of the camera footage from the night where the incident happened. Pausing, looking at Patrick straight into the eyes, Victor solemnly said, We found something. Nodding his head, Patrick spoke. Show me. Tapping on the holographic function of the tablet, a 3D video replayed in front of Patrick. The camera angle pointed towards a rather secluded parking lot area near the nightclub. Pointing at the video, Victor said, In one of the video cameras, we managed to spot a suspicious individual exiting the venue right after the fight started. The most interesting part regarding that individual is that he was wearing a skin mask. Frowning, Patrick couldn't help but glance at Victor as he asked, A skin mask? That is indeed suspicious. Did you manage to find out his identity? Right now, he didn't really care about the details. He just wanted to find the guy responsible for crippling his son. Nodding his head, using the holographic function of the tablet, a profile appeared before Patrick. We've managed to identify the identity of the masked man that was responsible for taking the young master's arm. With reference from the database from the system, we managed to identify the man as Patrick Marr. He is currently working as a manager for a construction firm not so far from here, and other than that there were no notable discoveries. However, once we dug further we were able to find a crucial piece of information. Pausing slightly, Victor looked at Patrick and slowly said, The company he is currently working for is a subsidiary of Bull's Wrath. Nodding his head from time to time as he heard Victor talk, pausing for a moment as if something clicked inside of his mind, Patrick fell into deep thought. Bull's Wrath, I see. Repeating the name a couple of times, a trace of a smile appeared on his face. That indeed sounded suspicious. Bull's Wrath. If Patrick thought about it, the guild that would benefit the most out of Luxius fighting against Sword of Light would definitely be them. They too were a gold-graded guild, and compared to the other gold-graded guilds in the vicinity, they were the ones that were closest to both Sword of Light and Luxius. Moreover, both Luxius and Sword of Light had conflicts with Bull's Wrath. I see. As his thoughts paused there, the frown on his brows deepened. His instincts told him that Bull's Wrath were indeed the ones responsible for instigating the conflicts between Sword of Light and them. However, he didn't have enough evidence. Just because the culprit worked for a subsidiary that was under Bull's Wrath control didn't mean they were actually working for them. They could very well be hired mercenaries in disguise. This would mean that this was planned by someone else and that they were trying to insinuate that Bull's Wrath was behind it. Just who is it? The more Patrick thought about it, the more questions emerged in his mind. Just who? If only he had more evidence. Knock. Knock. Snapping Patrick out of his thoughts was the sound of someone knocking on the door. Regaining his usually cold bearing, Patrick coldly said, Come in. Opening the door, wearing a black suit, an individual came in. Master, we have received another report. Tack. What did you do with the two guys you brought here last time? Pausing for a moment, my hand froze for a split second. It took me a couple of seconds to understand what Small Snake was talking about. That's right, Small Snake was the one who helped me carry the bodies of the two individuals I met at Ryan's house. Them? Nodding his head, Small Snake asked once again.
Yeah.
What did you do with them? About that, they sort of escaped. Huh? Yup. They escaped. When I returned from my trip to Ryan's house, I brought them to a relatively isolated storage space and tied them up with a rope. I wanted to interrogate them and all, but... well, I had to go to the bathroom. By the time I returned they were already long gone. Very negligent on my side. As I recounted what had happened, noticing Small Snake's darkening face, I coughed in embarrassment. I obviously didn't let them go that easily. I am confident with regards to my knot tying skills, and honestly, I tried really hard to look for them. 10 minutes in, I had to give up as I really couldn't find them. Bam! Smashing my fist against the desk, I angrily spat. Damn, how could I have been so negligent? Sighing, Small Snake shook his head as he said. Sigh, your acting is really terrible. Opening my eyes wide, a hurt look appeared on my face. Wiping the corner of my eye, I replied with an aggrieved tone. What are you talking about? Why are you coming at me like that, Small Snake? How could you belittle me like that? Tack. Shaking his head, moving a pawn, Small Snake gestured for me to move. Your move. Snorting, I replied. You changing the topic won't change the fact that I'm pissed. Victor, contact the guild master of Sword of Light. As you wish. With his hands interlocked behind his back, Patrick stared at the window of his office. To think Bull's Wrath was so audacious and ambitious enough to think that they could play the Oriole without getting caught. How audacious indeed. Smirking, Patrick couldn't help but think to himself. Their plan might have actually succeeded if not for the fact that they had been negligent on their end. Just moments prior, he received a report detailing the fact that 2 of his subordinates had just come back heavily injured. After healing them, they instantly recounted everything that had happened. From how they were trying to recruit Ryan, to suddenly finding themselves ambushed and how they miraculously escaped. For the most part, Patrick didn't care, however, a certain section of the report intrigued him. I saw that the aggressor had an insignia of a bull with a cross inside of his sleeves. Bull with a cross. That was Bull's Wrath's insignia. From then, Patrick read the report more seriously and got a better idea of what had happened. Apparently, someone wearing Bull's Wrath insignia stopped them from recruiting the kid that they had a slight interest in. Although it didn't prove that Bull's Wrath was responsible for the conflict, it was enough for Patrick. He didn't believe in coincidences. He had already sent the information to Sword of Light, now it was time to wait. He will definitely make them pay for what they've done. Tack. Moving one of the chess pieces on the board, Small Snake couldn't help but ask. So basically you redirected everything you did to Bull's Wrath? Tack. Nodding my head in confirmation, I moved another one of my chess pieces. Glancing at the board, apart from a few pieces, almost everything was gone.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Frowning, Small Snake asked. Why Bull's Wrath though? Out of all the guilds he chose to use as a scapegoat, why Bull's Wrath? He was genuinely curious. Smiling, whilst waiting for Small Snake to make a move, I said. There are multiple reasons why I chose Bull's Wrath. Geographically they are the closest guild next to Sword of Light and Luxius. They hold a grudge with both Luxius and Sword of Light. They are famous for being overbearing, and taking whatever they wanted. Pausing slightly, my eyes narrowed. But out of all the reasons, the most important out of all points that I have just listed, is that they too showed interest in Ryan. And you don't touch what I already set my eyes on. Ah. Nodding his head, Small Snake somewhat understood. Apart from the last point, everything he said was reasonable. Be it geographically, reputation-wise, and relationship-wise, Bull's Wrath was the ideal guild to put the blame on. That he didn't disagree with. As his thoughts paused there, Small Snake couldn't help but be impressed. The level of detail in the plan was something that even he, someone who has seen a lot, couldn't help but be impressed with. Tack. Placing his piece down, Small Snake asked. Can I ask you one more question? Go ahead. What happens after Sword of Light and Luxius beat Bull's Wrath? Won't they just focus their attention back on Ryan then? Hearing Small Snake's questions, a smile appeared on my lips. Shaking my head, I laughed. You forgot something, Small Snake. Pausing, I slowly said. Human greed is boundless. Even if Sword of Light and Luxius win, you didn't forget that both of their heirs are currently heavily injured, right? Shaking his head, Small Snake said. No. Seeing that he was following, I continued. The alliance is merely temporary. By the time both guilds swallow Bull's wrath, they will soon both be at each other's throat fighting for what little remains of Bull's wrath as an excuse to weaken each other. Though on the surface it was an alliance, it was merely one made out of convenience. As soon as Bull's wrath was out of the picture, they will immediately fight against each other. By then, no matter who wins, they would be so busy fighting each other that years would have already have passed. And during the time they were fighting, Ryan would already have been long forgotten by them. In the end, what I did was something that would have inevitably have happened in the near future regardless of my interfere dash. Ding! Stopping me mid-sentence, my phone rang. As soon as it did, a smile appeared on my face.
Ah!
Finally! Checking my phone, and confirming that it was indeed the message I was looking for, my smile deepened. Sword of Light and Luxius have jointly declared war against Bull's wrath. Tack! Moving my queen diagonally to the Black King, I said. Checkmate. Game over, White won. Staring at the chessboard that displayed the large "You won" sign, I couldn't help but glance at Small Snake and say.
Ah!
Don't you just love it when everything falls into place? Chapter 95, Return 1. Currently, talking about the Northern District, Sword of Light and Luxius, two major gold-graded guilds, have officially declared a guild war against Bull's wrath. Although the reason for the sudden war is unknown, sources say that it has to do with the heirs of both respective goo. Click! Turning off the TV, lazily sitting on my chair, I glanced at Small Snake. Small Snake, how's the stock market faring? With his eyes glued on two large monitors filled with numbers, Small Snake apathetically replied. Just as you predicted, Bull's wrath stock has declined hard. All right. Leaning back on my chair, I lazily nodded my head. Prior to everything that had happened, using all the money I had left, I shorted Bull's wrath stock. Knowing that their stock would plummet once Luxius and Sword of Light officially declared a guild war against them, I shorted their stock. And with that, I solved my money problem. So not only did I resolve the issues with Ryan, but I now also resolved the money situation that had been annoying me for the past week or so. In just one move, I managed to resolve two of the problems that had been bothering me lately. Like the saying goes, 2 birds with 1 stone. And honestly, couldn't be more content with the result. Although I do have to point out the fact that what I did was definitely illegal. Yup. Well, as long as I don't get caught. You ain't guilty till proven guilty. I'll stick with that rationale for now. Now that you've sorted out Luxius, what about Ryan? Him?
Yeah.
Thinking for a moment, I half closed my eyes and lazily responded. Nothing really, we just wait for them to call. Taking his eyes off the monitors, Small Snake frowned as he glanced in my direction. Wait, you just went through all of this trouble to get rid of Luxius off of Ryan's back, and right after solving everything you suddenly start to become passive? What? Seriously looking at Small Snake, I nodded my head. Pretty much. I mean, it's not that I was being passive. It's just that I was that confident in what I proposed. Anyone with a sane mind would without a doubt agree to the terms I proposed. I mean, the terms I proposed were just too good to be turned down. Not only did I include a hefty sum of money as a salary for Ryan, I also included added benefits such as short working hours and free housing. What more could you ask for? Actually, looking back on the terms I proposed, my heart couldn't help but start bleeding. For a 12-year-old kid, I really did go overboard. But I don't regret it. It was worth the investment. Wait, what if they thought it was a scam? Oh.
Shh.
*T. Recalling the fact that my mercenary group was only I ranked with no missions or accomplishments to its name, I slowly started frowning.
Yeah.
Now that I thought about it carefully, without a doubt they might assume this might be a scam. Thinking thus far, my face couldn't help but darken. I miscalculated. Sigh. Staring at my continuously changing face, Small Snake couldn't help but sigh. I'm not even going to ask about why your face is currently looking like that. My instincts are telling me to ignore you completely. Pausing, glancing at his watch, Small Snake couldn't help but say. Anyways, shouldn't you be heading back home? Me? Why? Snapping me out of my thoughts, I frowned as I looked at Small Snake in confusion. Why would I go back home now? Did he want me to leave? Rolling his eyes, and sighing once again, Small Snake said. Don't you have to return to the lock today? Asterisk 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 asterisk. Bam! Throwing as many curses as I could muster, I quickly packed up everything that I could find on my desk and made a run for it. The fact that today was the day I was supposed to return to the lock completely slipped my mind. I was careless. Right? Stopping right before the entrance of the building, as my feet were jogging in place, looking at Small Snake, I reminded him. Before I leave, make sure to contact Leopold. Since we made enough money from this ordeal, hiring him shouldn't be a problem. In the meantime, since we're in the same school, I'll take care of recruiting Ava, so just focus on recruiting him. Turning his attention back on the monitors, Small Snake nodded his head. On it. All right, I think I've said enough, gotta go, contact me if you need anything. Without waiting for Small Snake's reply, I dashed out of the building. My family was probably already waiting at the train station. Couldn't afford to waste any more time. Ren, hurry up or you're going to miss the train. Calming. Running towards the train platform, I heard my mother's shout coming from the other side of where I was, near the air train that I was supposed to board. Huff, huff, I made it. Quickly arriving in front of the doors of the train, with my arms on my knees, I heavily gulped for air. Approaching me, with Nola in her arms, my mother asked. Ren, why are you so late? Huff, huff, nothing really, I was just busy with work and stuff. Work? Ah, well, with the subsidiary and stuff. I wasn't lying. Because I was so busy dealing with the mercenary stuff, I completely forgot about the fact that today I was returning to the lock. My 1-month holiday was finally over. Well, to call it a holiday would be an overstatement, as I was busy almost every day with the mercenary group and stuff. Not once did I properly rest. Good job. Nodding his head, my father smiled in appreciation. He was happy that me, his son, was taking what he had said seriously. Sigh, all right, but don't overdo it. Somewhat getting the gist of what had happened, my mother helplessly sighed. Putting Nola down and extending her arms in my direction, she said. Give us a hug. All right. Smiling, I walked forwards and hugged everyone. This went on for a solid minute as they refused to release me from their clutches. Beep. 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 Oh, it's time for me to go. Hearing the beeps coming from the train, signaling that it was about to depart, I finally freed myself from their hugs. Entering the train, I looked at my family once again. Smiling as I stared at them happily waving at me, I couldn't help but feel my heart grow warm. 1 month. Altoag short, I couldn't help but feel a bond as I stared at them. Most of the emotions probably came from the previous Ren, but I had a feeling that a part of it was also mine. As I stared at them, the image of my previous family started overlapping with theirs. A faint smile appeared on my lips. Thank you for everything.
Bye.
Big Blodar. Glancing at Nola, who was waving at me with a sad face, I smiled. Squatting down to her height, I couldn't help but say, Nola, try saying my name. Not Big Brother but Ren. Now that I was about to go and was probably not going to see her for a while, I wanted for her to call me by my name at least once. She always referred to me as Big Brother, but never actually called me by my name. It's Big Brother Ren, say it. Big Blodar RRMHH. Nodding her head, Nola tried to say it, but halfway through, her face couldn't help but scrunch up as she couldn't pronounce the R. Seeing her struggle, calmly nodding my head, I slowly repeated my name. Repeat with me R-E-N. B-N? Instantly my smile froze. My body shook along with my smile. With the most gentle voice I could muster, I carefully said. And Nola, it's Ren with an R, don't forget the R-Oka huh? Clank. Right before I could finish, the doors to the train started closing, sending me into a panic. No, I can't be having this. Damn it, doors, don't close now. Bam. 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 In desperation, I started pounding at the door as I looked at Nola, who was cheerfully smiling and waving at me. Through the gap of the closing doors, I shouted. Nola. ITS Ren with an R, don't forget the R. Actually anything other than Ben is okay, too. Waving, Nola smiled and said.
Bye.
Big Brother Ben. Clank. Destination, Central District Lock. Bam. 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 Pounding at the door with all my might, I screamed as the train slowly picked up its speed. No, Nola no. No.
No.
Hey, can you keep it down? Can't you see that there are other people here? Just as I was in the midst of my despair, an annoyed voice resounded from the back of the train. Standing up, a beautiful young girl with short auburn hair glared in my direction. I was trying to sleep when you're shouting suddenly Shut it lady, I'm in a life and Just as we were both about to shout at each other, turning around and seeing each other's faces, we froze. After a solid couple of seconds of silence, I couldn't help but break the silence. Just why? Just why in the world was Emma standing in front of me? Chapter 96, Return 2. Well, I somehow managed to recover from the mental damage I received earlier. But as if the fact that my little sister couldn't pronounce my name was enough, I suddenly found myself on the same train as Emma.
Yeah.
Emma Rochefield, one of the main protagonists and daughter of the mayor of Ashton City. Sigh. To make things worse, she was now sitting next to me with both of her eyes closed. Seemingly asleep. It felt as if I was sitting on needles. Shut up. An hour into the train ride, I couldn't help but yawn. But to Emma, who was sitting next to me, my seemingly quiet yawn instantly caused a reaction from her. The reason for her outburst was most likely due to the fact that she was looking for an excuse to pick a fight with me from the very beginning. And as soon as she saw the opportunity, she shot back at me. I guess she still held a grudge against me for what I did to Jean, couldn't blame her though. I'd show a similar reaction if I found one of my friends suddenly being held by the throat. Not that I had any, maybe small snake, but in all honesty I'd probably laugh first. Briefly glancing at her, rolling my eyes, I retorted. What? That's your 8th yawn. You counted? Who in the world would count how many times someone yawned? That's not normal. I can tell what you're thinking. No. I don't have the habit of counting when someone yawns, but it's different when every time you yawn you stretch and nudge all the way over to my side. Ah. Makes sense. That indeed sounded like something I would do. Sorry. You should be. Since I was in the wrong, I rightfully apologized. But after hearing her response, I started regretting it. In the end, I didn't say anything else and just leaned back on my chair. Wasn't worth the hassle, that was my original train of thought. However, as the train ride continued, I couldn't help but frown. Noticing my change in attitude, Emma angrily asked, "What?" I had originally planned to ignore her and wait for the train to smoothly arrive at the lock after noticing her grumpy mood, but a thought suddenly occurred to me. Glancing at her, I asked, "Hey, why are you taking the train? How's that any of your concern?" Smiling, unbothered by her sharp response, I said, "You didn't forget, did you?" "Forget what?" As she spoke, each of her words was covered in thorns. Almost as if she was suppressing herself from lashing out at me. Pretending to be oblivious to it, I lazily said, "That you owe me one." Though she still looked angry, her mouth couldn't help but shut. She was at a loss for words. No matter how much she wanted to rebuke, no words came out of her mouth. She knew I was right. That's that and this is. Ah, I guess your life is only worth that much, fair enough. GHHH, fine. Backed into the corner, Emma could only angrily stomp her feet on the ground. She, like Amanda, didn't like to owe others favors, and thus after I reminded her of the fact that I had saved her life, she could only lower her head in defeat. Sulking, she said. "What do you want to know?" Smiling inwardly, once again, I asked, "Why are you taking the train?" Though my question seemed random and intrusive, there was a very specific reason why I asked her this. Emma was rich. Let me rephrase. Emma Rochfield was filthy rich. So rich that she could probably buy my parents' guild 100 times over with her allowance alone. This meant that she didn't have to take the train to get to the lock. No, in fact. Considering how doting her father was, there was no way that she would be allowed to take a train to the lock. Moreover, as I looked around her, she didn't have any bodyguards around protecting her. This was something that her father would normally never allow. And if my hunch was correct, this meant one thing. In short, my father is currently not in Ashton City and my uncle told me to take the train back to the lock. I see. As I suspected. Though I ignored most of what she said, my ears picked up an important piece of information. Father not in Ashton City and uncle told me to take the train back to the lock. Though she didn't go into detail, I already knew who her uncle was. Theodore Rochfield. The second in command in the Rochfield household, and Emma's illegitimate uncle. Also the main antagonist of the Emma route. The route which causes her to fall in love with Kevin. Problem was, this event, according to my calculations, shouldn't have started till a further 2 months from now. A month after the midterms. This meant that the timeline has changed. Frowning, I couldn't help but once again realize that the plotline had been distorted. The real question this time was it my fault or was something beyond my grasp manipulating the story from the dark? Could it perhaps be the one who sent me to this world? If so, what was their goal, and why me? In the end, for the remainder of the train ride, I sat in my seat immersed in my own thoughts. Completely forgetting about the fact that Emma was sitting next to me. "Ryan, why are you looking at those files?" "Nothing, I was just curious." Inside a rundown apartment, a young boy was carefully looking through a stack of files. As he read through the files, his eyes couldn't help but wander towards the TV. The news channel was on. Currently, talking about the Northern District, Sword of Light and Luxius, two major gold-graded guilds, have officially declared a guild war against Bull's Wrath. Although the reason for the sudden war is unknown, sources say that it has to do with the heirs of both respective gu. So it was you. Despite his features looking like that of a 12-year-old, his eyes and expression had no resemblance to that of a 12-year-old child. As his eyes alternated between the TV and the files in his hand, a faint smile appeared on his lips. Recalling the events that had happened a couple of days prior, Ryan couldn't help but think back at the moment where the youth with blue eyes and black hair had come over and got rid of the two people sent from Luxius. He didn't think much back then because he was too preoccupied with his mother. But after news of Luxius suddenly declaring a guild war reached his ears, Ryan couldn't help but notice that something didn't add up. The timing. It was exactly a couple of days after he saw the black-haired youth taking those two guys from Luxius back with him. Ryan's initial impression of the black-haired youth wasn't all that great. That's because of what he saw on his sleeve. Regardless of what was happening, Ryan was still paying attention to every little detail around him. At first, Ryan did in fact, just like the two guys from Luxius, also think that the black-haired youth was from Bull's Wrath, primarily due to how he was able to see the insignia hidden beneath his sleeves. But as he read through the papers regarding his mercenary group, Ryan instantly understood everything that had happened. Moreover, as he looked at the TV, Ryan could more or less determine that everything had been that youth's doing. Or at least he played a part in it. Interesting. It didn't take long for him to get a clear picture of what he did. From how he instigated Luxius and Sword of Light to fight, to how he was able to pin all of the blame on Bull's Wrath. Ryan too came up with a similar plan. In fact, he had many more complicated plans which took less time and were more efficient, but all of his plans carried a couple of critical flaws disabling him from carrying them out. His inability to fight, and his mother. With those two factors holding him back, he couldn't find any way to get rid of the troubles that had been coming his way. No matter how much he wanted to put them into action, with his not even ranked stats, his plans would never work. He was simply too weak. Thus he could only give up and helplessly be put into situations that stressed his mother. He hated that. He hated his own powerlessness. He would always wake up at night cursing at God for giving him a smart brain but no abilities to go along with his brain. Especially since this was a world where strength meant everything. His intelligence and brilliance was hence often overlooked. Flip. 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 Looking through the ridiculous offer that was presented before him, Ryan couldn't help but be tempted. The deal was much better compared to the one offered to him by Luxius. In fact, it was leagues better. Free housing, good salary, short working hours, it was the ideal job. Moreover, remembering how hard his mother was working every day to feed him, Ryan found himself on the verge of signing this paper. However, he stopped himself halfway through. He was too impulsive. He needed to observe more, he needed to understand more, and thus after a short while of thinking Ryan decided that he wouldn't sign the papers. At least not until he determined whether they were trustworthy or not. He couldn't take any chances. Ryan, time for dinner. Hearing his mother calling for him, as if a switch had been flipped, a childish expression appeared on his face. Happily smiling, he shouted, "I'm coming, Mom." Chapter 97, Midterms, 1. Clink. Bastard. 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 Entering her dorm, Emma furiously threw her stuff on her bed. Her mood couldn't be any worse. How dare you ignore me like that? This was the first time she felt so disrespected. Throughout her whole train ride to the lock, she sat next to the one guy she was most curious about. The guy whom she suspected saved her life back in Hallberg. And she wasn't wrong. He brazenly admitted this fact when he rubbed it all over her face. Just recalling the smirk he had on his face as he openly admitted that fact irked her to no end. Although this annoyed her, it wasn't what truly irritated her. No. What irritated her was the fact that he had completely ignored her after she had answered his question. No matter what she did, he wouldn't respond nor acknowledge her existence. Almost as if she was nothing but air. Ghhhhhh. Just thinking about it irritated her even further. She would definitely not forget this. Randover. That was his name. Clenching her jaw, Emma swore to herself. You better make sure that the next time I see you I'm not in a bad mood, else. Achoo. Is someone thinking about me? Rubbing my nose, I couldn't help but feel like someone was talking behind my back, and I was pretty sure I wasn't overthinking things. In the first place, with my current body, normal flus shouldn't be affecting me. After thinking for a bit, I just shrugged it off.
Meh.
Who cares? I have other things to worry about. Like training. With exams starting next week, the training center was filled to the brim with students. It was to the point that in order for me to get a decent workout, I had to train late into the night. Hoo.
Yeah.
The heavy and tired shouts coming from the training dummies' sparring areas echoed throughout the whole center. The residual magic power from the spars swept throughout the halls, creating a thick and dense atmosphere. In the gym area of the training center, students could be seen lifting 150 kilograms dumbbells effortlessly. Almost as if they were just holding on to their phones. I too tried lifting dumbbells. However, what I could do was pitiful compared to other students. This was mainly due to the fact that the people next to me were muscle heads. Like, each of their biceps was about the same size as my head. Ridiculous. Weeing. Ugh. Using my phone's vibration as an excuse to stop training, I put down the bar I was lifting. Dizziness immediately came over me as I felt my chest become numb. It seemed 190 kilograms bench press was still too much for my current self. Sitting up straight, I wiped my sweat off with a towel hanging around my neck. I then proceeded to check my phone. The documents are ready, but are you really planning on going through with the terms you've offered to Leopold? It was a message from Small Snake. It looks like Small Snake has already made contact with Leopold. That's good. I wasn't worried about him not accomplishing the mission as I fully knew the extent of his abilities. With how well connected and intelligent he was, recruiting Leopold shouldn't be a problem. Now I only needed to wait for Ryan. I was sure he was already contemplating my offer. With just a little bit of time, he would definitely come along. With regards to Ava, now that I was back in the lock, I could easily take care of her. Everything needed time though. I wasn't quite going to approach her yet. I first needed to pass the midterms. This was a far more pressing issue as the results could determine my future. You see, I set myself a goal for the upcoming midterms. Top 100. Yes. I didn't misspeak. Top 100. There were several reasons as to why I set my goal to be that high, but it primarily boiled down to two reasons. Facilitate recruitment of people whom I want to join my mercenary group. Buy time for my parents. The first point was self-explanatory. Who would want to join someone's mercenary group when the current leader of the group was only ranked 1550 in the lock? It just didn't make sense. I mean, in all fairness. If someone ranked 1550 approached me and tried to recruit me, I'd probably laugh at their face. Though I doubt Ava was the type of person to do that, she wasn't the only person I wanted to recruit. If I reached the top 100, recruiting people that I wanted would definitely be much easier. The second reason, well, if I reached the top 100, my family could use this to stop the advances coming from the opposition. Not fully stop them, but slow down. With me reaching such a high rank, my parents could definitely use this as leverage when talking to the board members. But well, I knew that their talk wouldn't go anywhere as my talent was assessed as D after all. To them, regardless of how outstanding I was destined to never go beyond D rank. Well, at least that was what was written on paper. In reality, I had no talent cap. Let alone AS rank, I could easily go even beyond SS rank. Higher than the current top leaders of humanity. Pausing my thoughts, I frowned. Matthew will definitely be not pleased about this development, but well, it shouldn't be a problem as of yet. I knew he wouldn't move until my parents' guild was fully taken, and with that, I probably bought myself another couple of months. Moreover, with me currently being in the lock, he couldn't even vent his frustrations on me. This was ideal as I really didn't want to go through another annoying situation where Aldrin would take over. Plus, the more time I had, the more I could prepare for my trip outside of Earth. By the time I returned, the curse taking over my parents would no longer be a threat, and Aldrin's influence would no longer haunt me. Actually, with regards to the trip, I have to talk to Kevin, don't I, huh? I mean, he was the only person that could go out of Earth whenever he wanted. All thanks to the system he had. With his system, he could travel to any planet he wanted, but it didn't come cheap. Depending on how far he wanted to travel, he had to use a monster core. This alone prevented him from going very far as they were all rare and expensive. Plus, considering the place that I wanted to go, I estimated that I needed to find at least a less than D ranked core. Damn it. Buying it was definitely not an option. I mean, I'd have to have at least 100 million U, and that's with no one making a bid for it. Though it wasn't considered their main planet, it was still considered an extremely important planet 902. For them, as it was the planet with the most fertile soil, meaning that it was the planet where most of, if only the planet the cure was located in wasn't that far off from Earth. In the end, that was only wishful thinking on my end. Just the fact that I didn't need a less than C rank or above core was enough for me to thank the heavens. If it was really above D rank, I may as well just give up. I mean, regardless of how much money I saved up, there was no way I could afford to purchase such high-leveled core in that short of a time frame. It just wasn't something I could do even with stocks. Either way, the planet I needed to go to was called Amora. A planet that used to be inhabited by the orcs. Well, that was until the demons came and took over. Though it wasn't considered their main planet, it was still considered an extremely important planet for them as it was the planet with the most fertile soil, meaning that it was the planet where most of the orcs' food was made. The place was fraught with danger, and if by the time I went there I wasn't at least E ranked, I stood no chance at surviving. That's how dangerous the place was. Dangers aside, I had another problem. How was I going to ask Kevin to bring me there? It's not like I could go to him and say, "Hey, Kevin, my good pal. I want to go to Amora, so bring me there." How did I know you could travel to different planets? What a silly question, I am your creator after all.
Yeah.
Not happening. Ding. Ding. Disrupting me from my thoughts was the loud sound of the alarm I set on my phone. I guess it's time for me to head back. It was already 10 p.m. signaling that it was time for me to wrap up with what I was doing and go to sleep. I determined that for me to be in optimal conditions each day, I had to sleep at least 8 hours a day. Especially since the midterms were now right in the corner. In the morning I would study, and in the afternoon and night, I would train my body. That was my current lifestyle. Couldn't say I liked it, but, well, I needed the good grades. Especially since I had a goal to accomplish. Thus, I went back to the dorm. With regards to the Kevin situation, I'll figure it out after the exams. I still had 4 months to prepare after all. Chapter 98, Midterms, 2. Lock, Class A25. The sound of scribbling pencils rang out in the classroom. Almost all of the students present were hard at work preparing for the upcoming written exams. Arg, why do we have to go through this when we don't actually use this stuff in real life? Of course, there was bound to be at least one or two students who hated studying. But well, what he said did make sense. Most of the stuff we learned wasn't even useful for those of us who didn't plan on pursuing such a career path. Exams are next week. Study hard, or you're going to have regrets when the results come out. Turning around, a student replied.
Yeah.
It's not like you'd understand my struggles. Being reprimanded, the student that complained could only grumble to himself as he went back to studying. In the end, it seems like he was just venting out his stress. Lightly glancing at the duo, I shook my head. Regardless of what world you were in, there would always be a guy who hated studying and a guy who loved studying. I was neither. I didn't dislike studying nor did I love it. I just studied for the sake of it. Well, that was what I initially thought. However, looking at the question that was presented before me, I couldn't help but slowly start leaning towards the no-studying group. Suppose a ranked monster, metal-fanged Magelladon, attacked you in the middle of the ocean. How much force do they exert each time they bite, and point out their weak points on the diagram below? Extra point. What is the primary scion flow of the metal-fanged Magelladon, and what is the fastest speed it can reach underwater? I was stumped. I had no clue where to start. Was this really going to be on the exam? I don't even remember writing about this monster inside of the novel. I mean, there were so many monsters that I had to remember that I could barely even think straight at this point. I understand that they want us to learn this in case we actually met this monster in combat so that we would be able to deal with them accordingly if the situation presented itself. But with current technology, finding the information about the monster shouldn't be hard at all. Just a quick cross-reference with the monster encyclopedia in the app and all the information would be presented before me. Well, in all fairness, I guess it did help in situations where the phone couldn't be taken out or that there was no battery left on the phone. Damn it, world. If you're going to write questions regarding monsters, at least make it so that I knew something regarding them. Don't give me questions on relatively unknown monsters. Ruins the whole point of me being the author and using that as an advantage. Ding dong. In the midst of my rant, at that moment, the bell rang signaling the end of the class. The class was technically a review class, but in reality, it was just a self-study class as there was no professor supervising the students. In any case, as soon as the bell rang, almost all of the students got up from their seats and left the class. It was evident that the majority hated studying. I, of course, planned to follow them back to the dorm. What was the point of studying in a classroom when you had no friends? In the end, apart from Kevin and a couple of other people, everyone left the class. And like that, it was the day of the exams. Surprisingly, I wasn't nervous. Apart from the fact that an artificial lake appeared beneath my feet, I really showed no sign of nervousness. Hey, man, did you cram all night?
Yeah.
I didn't sleep the whole night. How'd you think you'll do? Not sure, hopefully, I'll pass. Listening to the people besides me conversing, the butterflies in my stomach intensified. I didn't cram. Not because I didn't want to, but from past experiences, I always tended to perform badly when I crammed. Just wasn't something that worked for me. 7:55 a.m. Glancing at my watch, I knew that I had 5 minutes left before the exam. A long line had already started forming by the entrance of the classroom. In front of them, a professor holding onto a tablet patiently waited for the students before doing the register. Fidgeting with my hands, I nervously looked around in hopes of finding something to distract myself from the wait. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. If only I had something that could help me determine what was going to be on the test dash. Pausing my thoughts, my eyes shot wide open. Hold up. Why didn't I think of this before? Quickly rummaging through my bag, I took out a thick red book. Flip. 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 Without skipping a beat, I flipped through the pages of the book. Equals. State the theory of unbounded monster relativity. Write down the proof as well. As Kevin looked through the papers, without pause, he quickly compiled the answers on the white answer sheet in front of him. What degree of control would someone need in order to determine the circulatory flow of their scion link in their body? How much was the link? Equals. Cuckoo. Looking through the red book, I couldn't help but find myself laughing hysterically. Almost like an evil dictator that had successfully completed his plan. Instantly all of my worries washed away. Cross-referencing with my phone, I quickly memorized everything that I could memorize in that short time frame. It seems like the world had finally taken pity on me. I now had a proper shot at getting a good grade. Student ranked 1550 Rindover? 5 minutes on the dot, the professor called for me. Helpless, I could only put the book and phone away and say, "Present." With that, I entered the exam hall, and as I did, I couldn't help but be reminded of the hellish days when I had to enter the exam rooms back in my previous world. How did you think you did? I think it was all right. I'm confident in my chances of passing. I got a question on Valdev's law. I seriously forgot about it. You go that? I got a question on Zlorov's law. Staring at the students happily conversing as they left the class, a defeated smile appeared on my lips. Every step I took felt as if a solid thick piece of lead was stuck on them. I miscalculated once again. Just when I thought the world was finally answering my prayers, it went and fucked me over like never before. Turns out every student had different questions.
Yeah.
The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Fortunately, I somehow managed to answer all of the questions. However, because I was caught off guard, I lost some valuable time. Now I really had to pray for a passing grade. If I didn't, I'd have to redo the test again later in the summer. And honestly, wasn't too keen on doing that. Especially since I had a lot of things I needed to accomplish. Sigh. In the end, after letting out a long and exhausted sigh, I went back to my dorm. The midterms were far from over. I still had to prepare for the upcoming practical exams. Fortunately, unlike with the theoretical exams, I knew what the next exams were about. Dungeons.
Yeah.
We had to do a solo run of the school dungeon. The test scores were based on the time it took for students to complete the run. The faster the run, the higher the score. Unsurprisingly, in the novel, Kevin and Jean took the top spot. With timing that went along the lines of 1 hour and a couple of minutes. A far contrast to the average of the other runners that took approximately 2 to 4 hours. True monsters. Chapter 99, Midterms, 3. Beep. Beep. In a remote area of the academy, standing in front of a large portal, a group of students nervously stared at the professor before them. Students, please form a single line. As the professor spoke, a thick wave of residual magical energy emanated from the blue portal that was a few meters behind him. Though it wasn't overbearing, it still caused every student present to feel some form of pressure. Cave of Everbloom. That was the name of the dungeon in front of us. It was a multi-layered dungeon, meaning that it had different levels of difficulty, with the highest being C rank, and the lowest being G rank. Because of how the dungeon had different levels, the Lock desperately fought for the ownership of the dungeon. It was the perfect place to train students. With the dungeon having the same layout regardless of the level of difficulty, it was a perfect dungeon to assess students' performance. Moreover, it was also capable of fairly assessing students regardless of their rank. If you were G ranked, you would have to enter the dungeon in a G difficulty, and so on with higher ranks. This way, there was no element of unfairness as the monsters and layout were the same with each dungeon difficulty. Thus, in reality, this test was used to assess a student's combat ability rather than talent. Alright, everyone please pay close attention to what I'm saying as safety always comes first. Standing by the side of the portal, gathering everyone's attention back to himself, the professor spoke. Standing behind me is the dungeon that will be used for your practical exam for the midterms. The dungeon, as most of you know, is called Cave of Everbloom, and it's our academy's own dungeon. Pausing and staring at the students before him, the professor continued. For your practical assessment, in order for you to pass, all you have to do is get to the other side of the dungeon. Simple as that, just crossing over is considered a pass. However, for your grade, you will be assessed on two things. Raising two of his fingers, the professor's tone became stern. Time taken for you to reach the end of the dungeon, and how many monsters you kill throughout the raid. For each extra monster you kill, you will be given an extra point and so on. Pausing once again to make sure that everyone understood, after a couple of seconds, the professor continued. There will be third and second years hidden inside of the dungeon. This is so that in case you find yourself in trouble, they can quickly come to your aid. This is a safety precaution that the school has done to make sure none of you die. Looking at the students before him, the professor's voice turned grave. However, be warned. If the second and third years are forced to make a move, you will either have points deducted from your overall score or you will automatically fail the exam. So don't think that just because your life isn't in danger you shouldn't put the effort in the raid. If you're negligent, that's your score gone. Gulp. Finished with what he wanted to say, the professor noticed a lot of students swallowing a mouthful of saliva. It was evident that most of them were nervous. Not minding it, as he was used to such situations, taking out a transparent orb from his dimensional space, the professor presented it before everyone. This orb here will measure your current rank, so once I call your name please put your hand on the sphere. Soon after the sphere measures your rank you will be assigned to your respective dungeon difficulty. Standing a couple of meters away from the professor, my eyes were drawn towards the orb the professor was holding. The Orb of Identification. A special artifact that measured someone's rank. It was created through the usage of an old dried-up monster core and essentially measured someone's rank through the flow of mana. I won't go too much into detail with regards to how it measures the stats of a person, but in short, depending on rank, the orb will shine different colors. G, blue. F, yellow. E, green. D, red. C, pink. Those were the respective colors that represented a person's rank. Anything above C rank required a different measuring tool, as the Orb of Identification was merely a tool that measured an approximate rank of a person. It wasn't actually very accurate. Holding onto a black tablet, the professor's stern voice resounded across the space. Student rank 1, Kevin Voss, please step up. Called up, Kevin slowly walked in the direction of the professor. Arriving before the orb, Kevin looked at the professor and asked, "Do I put my hand on the orb?" "Yes." Nodding his head, under every student's anticipated gaze, Kevin placed his hand on the orb. Voo-woo-um. Unsurprisingly, as soon as Kevin placed his hand on the orb, a tremendous red hue enveloped the surroundings. D rank. That's what the red color symbolized. A rank that no first year should ever come close to. At least not until the end of the first year. Looking around, I could see every student present staring at Kevin's back in shock. Surprisingly, the calmest person was actually Jean, who didn't seem to care about the fact that Kevin was D-ranked. I was honestly pleasantly surprised by this development. Normally Gene would have already been clenching his jaw and glaring at Kevin like there was no tomorrow, but it seems like he really did change, as Kevin told me back in Hallberg. Done. Soon after Kevin removed his hand from the orb, silence prevailed in the surroundings. Everyone was looking at him in utter shock. The professor included. After a couple of seconds, recovering from the shock, the professor spoke. D rank, student Kevin Voss will go to the D rank section of the dungeon. Not minding the attention he was getting, Kevin nodded towards the professor and headed back to where the students were. Staring at Kevin's figure for a couple of seconds, snapping out of his daze, the professor looked at his tablet and continued. Student rank 2, Melissa Hall, please step up. Students rank 3, Jean Horton, please step up. And so like that, everyone's rank was measured. Apart from Melissa, whose rank was F, Jean, Amanda, and Emma were respectively assigned towards the E-graded difficulty of the dungeon. Rank 1550, Rendover, please step up. Finally, it was my turn. Not minding the stares coming from certain individuals, I walked up to the professor who was holding on to the orb. Please put your hand on the orb. Nodding my head, I slowly placed my palm on the orb. Vroom. As soon as I placed my hand on the orb, I felt a weird suction force coming from the orb. Soon after, without me needing to do anything, the mana inside of my body circulated. A couple of seconds after the mana inside of my body circulated, a green hue enveloped the surroundings. However, a couple of seconds after the green hue appeared on the orb, it was replaced by a pale yellow hue. Just moments before the hue turned yellow, as soon as the green hue enveloped the place, some of the people around me couldn't help but gasp in shock. It had to be noted that green symbolized E rank. For me, a relatively unknown person, to suddenly show up with E rank stats would definitely surprise everyone. However, the green hue soon turned yellow, indicating that I was F ranked. Because this wasn't the first time this event happened, everyone quickly recovered from the shock, allowing me to sigh in relief. Seems like the orb liked to play tricks on me. Frowning slightly, the professor shook his head and said, Student Rendover, please make your way towards the F area. All right. Nodding towards the professor, I headed back towards where the students were gathered. Fortunately, because the device was not very accurate, it could only measure a relative approximation of my rank. Meaning that people only knew that I was F ranked, but not whether I was F-F or F+. And I liked for it to be that way. Though me reaching F- was still sort of unreasonable, it was still not as unrealistic as me reaching F+. Especially since I was ranked G- a couple of months ago. This was good. Though I had gathered more attention towards myself, it was still not a bad idea for me to make people think that I was weaker than I actually was. This way I could still make people underestimate me. Unlike Kevin, who brazenly showed everyone he had reached D rank. Thinking back, I think it was from this point on that he truly started being targeted by the likes of Gilbert and other jealous students. TSK. This was exactly why I didn't like to expose my strength. Too much trouble. Chapter 100, Midterms, 4. 1, 2, 3, 8, 15, 23, 47, 53. Counting the students present in the line designated for the ranked students, the professor quickly scribbled something onto the tablet in his hand, and lightly mumbled to himself. That's a significant increase compared to last year's batch. Nodding his head in satisfaction, putting the tablet away, in a stern tone, the professor spoke up. All right, all of the 53 students in the level difficulty, please listen up. As I have already explained the rules before, I won't go into too much detail with regards to what you need to do. However, I do have to remind you that you will all be sent to the same dungeon at the same time. Meaning that, yes, you can cooperate with one another. We won't stop you from collaborating with someone since, in real dungeons, such situations often occur. Pausing slightly, the professor squinted his eyes and his voice turned serious. And yes, with the fact that you can collaborate with the other students, it also means that you can also interfere with another person's progress. After all, the person who reaches first also gets an additional bonus point. So, not only do you have to watch out for the monsters inside of the dungeon, but you also have to watch out for the people next to you. Pausing and glancing at all of the students before him, smirking slightly, the professor said. You better watch out, in dungeons, no rules exist. What may seem like your teammate moments before can quickly turn and backstab you when you least expect it. Such situations aren't very rare occurrences inside of dungeons. With dungeons being places that had no cameras, situations where your ally would betray you as soon as the chance presented itself wouldn't be all that surprising. Especially if something tempted them into doing so. As the professor's words flowed through everyone's ears, all the students present took a step away from the person near them. Their eyes were full of vigilance. Human greed was boundless, you never know what would happen if you weren't alert. Glancing at the students who were now wary of each other, a satisfied smile appeared on the professor's face. Enough of that. I'm going to go brief the other students now. You have 5 minutes to prepare yourselves. If you're planning on choosing a teammate, you better choose yours carefully.
Bye.
Now. Finished with what he wanted to say, turning off his tablet, the professor headed towards the next group. Watching the professor leave, with his arms crossed, Arnold glanced at the students beside him. Immediately disdain appeared on his face. None of them were worthy of teaming up with him. In fact, he didn't need to team up with anyone. Arnold was confident no one would be able to beat him. That's how confident he was in his abilities. To him, no one was a competitor. As he was looking at the students, Arnold's eyes soon paused on a certain individual. Snorting to himself, Arnold couldn't help but clench his fists. Humph, to think that bug has also reached the F rank. Although Arnold was currently rank, he found it unbelievable that the student he had previously disdained had reached a similar level to his in a mere 2 months. Especially since he had promised young Master Jean before that he would have taken care of him. Time was almost up. Frowning, Arnold couldn't help but recall young Master Jin's odd behavior. He was much nicer than he had ever been in the past. He would no longer beat him to vent out his bad mood, nor was he spoken to as if he was someone beneath him. He almost treated him like an equal. Thinking thus far, Arnold couldn't help but feel his heart thumping in excitement. Acknowledged. That's how the current Arnold felt. He felt that the current Jean had finally acknowledged his hard work and dedication. All of his hard work had finally paid off. Jean now finally treated him like someone who was worthy of following him. Staring at Rin in the distance, Arnold couldn't help but recall the conversation he had with Jean 2 months prior. Before Hallberg. At how Jean wanted him gone. Yes. Since Jean had asked for it, now that he had been acknowledged, he must use anything within his power to satisfy Jean. Be it kneeling down, washing his clothes, to cleaning up bugs. He was prepared to do it. Arnold was prepared to do anything that was asked of him. Staring at Rin in the distance, Arnold licked his lips. You must pay a price for offending someone you shouldn't have. Picking my ear with my pinky, I noticed a couple of stares coming in my direction. Honestly, I couldn't be bothered to check who they were from. My mind was already focused on what was to come. According to what I remembered writing in the novel, this dungeon was located in a cave-like setting, meaning that there wasn't much room to maneuver the body freely. Moreover, the visibility inside of the dungeon was also low. I still vividly remember writing this part of the novel, hence why I knew a lot of what was to come. With Kevin being rank, the level of difficulty was on a much harder level. Though I didn't know the full layout of the dungeon as I never dwelled too deeply into it, I knew what monsters were present, their weak points, and where the traps were located. This was good. Thinking thus far, I started thinking about what else I could do to optimize my score. I think drifting steps would definitely give me an edge compared to the other students. However, there was a problem. I needed to kill monsters. With drifting steps, because the speed increased as time progressed. If each time I ran, I killed a monster, I would definitely lose all the momentum I had gathered. Especially since I couldn't kill whilst run at extreme speeds. This meant that I would lose a lot of momentum every time I killed a monster, which was not good. It also had to be noted that drifting steps was still not in the minor realm of mastery. Meaning that I wasn't very adept at using this skill. This further complicated things. I also had to take into account the fact that I wasn't confident in my written score. With me having wasted a lot of time, I wasn't too sure on high of a score I could get. I definitely had to score high on this exam. Thus not killing monsters wasn't an option. What do I do? Alright, everyone please pay attention to me. Snapping me out of my thoughts was the loud shout coming from the professor. I will now open the portal. Once you enter, you will automatically be transported towards your designated post. At the entrance of the dungeon, there will be another instructor that will give you some equipment and another short briefing on what to do and what not to do. Pausing, glancing at every student present, the professor's tone became incomparably grave. Please make sure you listen to whatever they say as it may save your life. No human is perfect. We may not be able to save you on time, thus you must listen carefully to what they tell you as it might save your life. Glancing at every student present to make sure they understood, the professor nodded. Have a nice trip. Finished with what he wanted to say, glancing towards a staff member wearing a black lock uniform on the right, the professor nodded in his direction. Nodding back, the staff member pulled a lever. Vroom. Right after the lever was pulled, the glow around the portal intensified as the residual magical power being emitted from the portal quadrupled in magnitude. The air around us solidified due to how thick the mana in the air was. Staring at the massive portal before him, the professor moved to the side and gestured towards a certain group not so far from where I was. G ranks first. Vroom. 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 On cue, after seeing the portals light up, the students standing in line for the G-ranked section entered the portal one by one. As I stared at the students entering the portal, I couldn't help but notice how their group was much bigger compared to the other groups. It seems like there were a lot of ranked students present. Like that, for the next 5 minutes, students would enter the portal one by one in a single line. Looks like everyone entered. Please change the dungeon level. After making sure that every student had entered the portal, glancing towards the left, the professor gestured towards the staff member on his right to once again switch the dungeon grade. Nodding his head, the staff member once again pulled the lever. Vroom. Soon after, the blue hue surrounding the portal intensified. The air around the portal further thickened, and solid threads of mana slowly sank their way into the portal. It was obvious that the portal difficulty increased. Without glancing at the portal, the professor glanced towards his tablet and said, F ranks, off you go. Vroom. 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 Right after his words entered the students' ears, one by one, the ranked students entered the portal. Foo. Glancing at the students who were entering the portal, taking a deep breath, and staring at the large portal before me, I too stepped into the portal. Vroom.
Ah.
Let's get this over with.